SDIC. I'm going to call the SDIC January 20th meeting to order. Roll call vote. Ken Anderton.
Ken Anderton is present.
Annie Stephenson.
Present.
Tom Hansel is present. We have a quorum. Welcome, everybody. It's been a little bit since we've seen each other. Happy New Year. Jim, I see a new look with some facial growth there. So
saving money, you know.
That's a good look, though. Good luck. So we have a pretty full agenda here today. So I want to also recognize this meeting is being recorded. Emily, any public testimony today?
No.
Thank you. No public testimony for the SDIC board today. It looks like, Janet, you might be ready to talk about finance and contracts, huh?
Looking forward to it. I guess I'll see about sharing my screen for you guys. Oh. Can I share my screen, Emily?
Yes, you should be able to now.
All right, thanks. Uh-oh, let me see which one it is. Here we go. Okay. Hopefully, can you guys see that?
Yes.
You can see it. Okay, great. This is the contract report that our procurement department put together, and it shows all the new contracts that Sandy has written for the month of December. You'll see there is, I guess, 4 of them: Cascade Dive, Cryptid Creative, Winterbrook Planning, and Cascadia Behavioral. If you have any questions about them, you'll see the dollar amount that were put together with these. Cascade Dive was like 5,000. Cascade of Behavioral was 11,000. I guess, is there any questions about that?
So, Janet, I was curious on the Cascade Behavioral. Do they invoice by district?
Yes, they do. They're
Okay.
all separate contracts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So Sandy only gets billed for the work that's done in the Sandy district.
Thank you.
And Chair Hansel, I'm trading emails with Mark Jolan to see if I can't partner up a little more clearly with the joint office on some outreach work, and we continue to talk to the city of Portland. Obviously not as relevant for you all, but in trying to get them to support some of these outreach efforts.
Well, the collaboration, Jim, you know all too well, we need to be talking across jurisdictions to be more effective. Otherwise, the public, I mean, this population that we're addressing, they're going to go, well, the city was just here yesterday and the county was here the day before. So
Yeah.
more coordination, much appreciated.
Yeah, we're doing our best.
Okay, so we'll move on to the Sandy financial. Let me make sure this is the correct one. Yes, okay. Can you guys see the new Sandy financial? Yeah. Okay, good. This is a report that Ben put together for us since he does all the downloading of the data from all the districts. But as you can see, it's got the 1920 Sandy budget to actual, and then the 2021, which is the audit that we just finalized, and then where we are this year for year-to-date actual. You know, this represents through December 31st, so we're just at the halfway point for the year, and there really isn't anything that looks unusual or anything that we should be concerned about at this point. Everything's pretty much on track. The direct billing assessments, we normally like to have those out by December, but my department has been a little busy with the COVID and some other things. So we'll have those done hopefully by the end of this month. And that's generally most of the federal properties. So I'll have to put a lot of time in on that since they're a little bit tough to collect anymore. Tanny, one thing that I believe that you asked at one of the last meetings was whether or not we had the cash carryover was represented correctly for the new year. And it's very, very close. I haven't done a formal reconciliation yet on it, but just running the numbers, it looks like, yes, we're right on track with that.
Great.
Any other questions?
Question,
Janet,
Janet, the direct
It looks like
billing.
we've paid off our debt. So do we have any remaining debt right now in SDIC?
I think that's the last payment
Yeah.
for Multnomah County.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we intentionally
the
kind of
last one.
accelerated it.
We did. Yeah, you would ask me the one thing I didn't look at, but I did revisit that when I was doing your audit, and it looks like, yeah, I think that we have paid that off now. So yeah, you guys have paid off that. You paid off your first interstate bank loan. So Tanny, did you have a question?
I did. The direct billing, how much do you anticipate that will be?
I think it's very close to the 70. Oh, it's not on the budget. What? Oh, it should be on the budget. You know what? It's generally right around $70,000.
So I'm wondering if it's included in that difference between the 808 and the 926.
No, I don't believe it is, but let me double check. No, we budgeted 72,000 for that, and it is not part of the 926. I'm not sure why it's not listed there, but the direct billing assessment should be 72,000, right around that dollar amount.
We'll get that updated for next month.
And
We will.
do you know why we're at 808? Is there something missing there?
Well, we've got more assessments in. That was only through December 31st, and I've gotten some other large assessments. So,
Okay, great.
and you know, they're going to continue to come in. So, you know, there's only 12% remaining, which is about what all the districts are at. So it's pretty much on target.
Okay.
I was thinking it was just East County people don't like taxes, but I don't know.
I think it's the feds, right, that don't like taxes.
There
Yeah,
you go.
they're getting harder and harder to collect on. And one is that with COVID, I've had a lot of retirees, so I've lost my contacts, and I'm scrambling, trying to find the next person to make sure that I get that relationship established. Because it's really hard to get them to pay, because it's just out of their ordinary. But I'm on it. I'm not going to let the revenue sit. Anything else?
This is really helpful, Janet. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tanny, anything else?
Yeah, I had more of a policy comment than anything. You know, with that 11,000 to Cascadia, I mean, is there somebody, the county or Metro, that we can bill back for some of that?
Jim?
There's no existing IGAs or anything that would allow us to. We have that sort of blockage authority we could try. I think it probably warrants maybe a longer conversation, but I'd be open to having it with you. My most recent efforts are really to try and work with the county to get the new money coming in through the Metro approved services measure to pick up some of these costs. And that's just the struggle of trying to find time with the joint office, and they're trying. I want to be clear, we're not getting blown off. It's just a challenge. And then Aster, I think, is on the line, and we're also working with a new organization a little bit called Cultivate Initiatives that quite honestly has better relationships with Pump Station 4 campers. Now, again, they're outside of your district. I think what I might say to you is I suspect, and others may have a better idea, that while you have that $11,000 figure, I don't think we're spending that much of it because we have fewer issues in SDIC with the need for outreach than we do in the other districts, but we have that available to us if we need it. Aster, I don't know whether you want to weigh in here.
Sure, yeah, I'll add to that. So something to know is that 11,000 some odd is supposed to be for 2, potentially 3 years. And Jim, you are correct that we won't necessarily spend that amount, but it's nice to have that in the contract in case we need it.
Appreciate that. It's just, some landowners aren't going to really make that connection very well.
Yeah, and it's sort of part of the conversation I've had with both City of Portland and the joint office, which is, while I appreciate you guys are challenged with capacity and resources, our landowners are paying us to do flood safety, and they're paying you to do social services, and paying me to do social services on top of paying you doesn't seem quite right. So we've been trying to make that case.
Appreciate that, Jim. Thank you.
Ken, anything from you?
Nothing for me. This looks pretty straightforward.
Janet, thank you so much. That was much appreciated.
Great. Well, I'm glad.
And we've already updated the financial report to reflect the missing 72K, according to Ben. So
Thank you. So moving on to item K in our agenda today. Mark, you're going to talk about our PED cost share.
I am. Thank you. Just waiting for step on the screen sharing here.
while we're waiting, just a shout out to the finance team overall, both the procurement side, accounting side, budget side. A lot of work being done there with old systems, and a lot of good work being done. So just want you to know they're both keeping us honest, but also just chunking through an awful lot of requests coming in from your program staff. So thank you, finance team.
Okay, so everyone see the presentation?
Yeah, looks good, Mark.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it, let you kick us off, Jamie, and I'm gonna try to get there.
Great, thank you. Well, good morning, board. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today and see you again. I'm Jamie Damon with Kearns and West, and I've been supporting your staff with conversations around the PMLS project, and a familiar face to all of you, I would hope by now. So we've got a short presentation for you about where we are with the project. We have, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll walk through our little mini agenda we have of our time. So we have some project updates to share with you, as we've done every time we've come before you. And then we're at a place where we have a staff recommendation for the cost allocation for PED. So we want to talk that through with you and get your thoughts, and then share with you what's happening next. Take a look at that big rainbow calendar schedule that we look at every time we get together and see what's coming up. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to project updates, and that will be the next slide with Mark.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Look forward to sharing our recommendations with you today. Give you a quick update with respect to our federal and state advocacy work. Just pleased to report that our congressional delegation has been doing what they need to be doing to help us try to get PED funded. And I'm not talking about necessarily our share, but to make sure that the Corps is funded to move into PED. That's something we can't take for granted. So Senators Wyden and Merkley and Congressman Blumenauer and DeFazio requested funding for all 3.5 years of PED at once, so that there won't be, potential stoppages each year requesting for annual funding, and that funding be made available through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that you've heard about in Congress. And Jim has actually been asked to, is expected to present to the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, as I understand. So all systems go with respect to pushing ahead and trying to get that federal funding and eventually authorization as well for the main project. As far as the City of Portland Task Force, which is completely sorry, I'm kind of on a roll here. That's not applicable to you folks. So I think with that, I will turn it back over to Jamie.
Yeah, so we've, as we talked about when we met with you last time, There are partner meetings that continue to occur to try to understand different partners' needs and the ability for them to contribute resources and, just a number of issues. So those meetings are still occurring. And just a reminder, we shared this with you when we met with you last time, but if you have not had a chance to look at it, we really encourage you to go to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers website and look at the, follow the link and look at the page. I mean, there's lots of detail there, really excellent information, and as we are now, really in the year of potentially getting started on the project, it's great to be more up to speed on this. So this is a great resource. So do check it out. So we'll just go ahead and move right along. So the recommended cost allocation for the PMLS design phase. So we have been, when Mark and Evan and Colin and I were putting our heads together around, kind of where we've been and where we are, as your staff was putting together the recommendation Mark will share with you today, we realized we've been at this conversation now for about a year. And so, we've come pretty regularly in front of you with information, back in last January with what we understood cost to be, with what we understood the cost share to be, with an ever evolving range of allocation methods and what that looks like. And we've had some really deep and robust conversations with all of you and with the other boards about where folks are at and what people could accept and what makes sense and how we move forward. And throughout all of those conversations, we've also gotten better information about the costs. We've gotten greater certainty about additional resources coming in through the state levy grant fund that Colin will talk with you about. And so we're just all in all a whole lot smarter a year later. And so, we want to just remind all of you that, what we're talking about here, there's nothing new other than a sharpened pencil and a more refined approach and greater certainty around additional revenues that are coming in. And so if you want to go to the next couple slides, these are just reminder slides, things that you've seen before. This is a reminder of what the PED costs look like total and in year 1, 2, 3, and 4, that a reminder that we're looking at a 35% cost share, and that we're estimating the PED to be about 4.16 million, and that the majority of the PED costs that occur in the first 2 years. So again, these are numbers that you've seen before, and all this is in the memo too that Mark put together. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Mark. And then the reminder about the potential revenue options. And so, we've had 2 conversations. One has been around the cost allocation methodologies and what makes sense. And then the other part is around the revenue options. What's our best guess, a likelihood scenario of additional dollars coming in and from where? And so you can see those all up here. We have new information to share with you about the state levy grant fund that is pretty exciting. So I'm not going to get the cat out of the bag with that one. As I mentioned earlier, we're continuing the conversations with partner agencies around partner contributions. So with the city, with the port, with other partners. And then these other items are more around taking a deeper dive in each one of the district's budgets to look at different scenarios around, well, what if these other dollars don't come in? What's our backup? And you'll see that in the staff recommendation that Mark will share with you, that we have a recommended approach that takes into account what we hope will happen and what we have a fair amount of certainty will happen. And then we also have a backup plan in case things don't go the way we'd hoped. So is the next slide yours, Mark? Oh, update since the last meeting. Nope, we have 2 more slides. And so since we met last, there have been a number of individual conversations with district board members. I know that Jim and his staff has spent a fair amount of time with all of you working through some of the concerns and questions around the cost allocation methodologies. Your staff has met with Business Oregon and received greater certainty of the availability and eligibility of the grant funds, and Colin will talk with you about that in just a moment. And then we've got a much better understanding of the revenue picture for each district the current and the 5-year projection to follow. And Ben, Ben Rowe, your budget manager, following our presentation, will give you a presentation about what it looks like for SDIC. And so we're not going to get into your budget details as part of this, but Ben will talk about that when we're done. So Colin, I'm going to hand it to you and your couple slides about the Business Oregon grant.
Thanks, Jamie and Mark. Just wanted to give the SDIC board a quick update on where we are on the Levee grant fund and application for it. But before doing so, a quick reminder is that this Levee grant fund opportunity is an evolution of the Levee sub-account of the Infrastructure Finance Authority, which was a loan program that the drainage districts helped advocate for with the legislature and with Business Oregon. The recognition that there was outstanding statewide need for levee investment and the need for the state to provide more grants as well as loans was made during the 2019 session. And so now Business Oregon is preparing to do a bond sale this spring. And we've been working with them since the last meetings that we've had with the board to get more certainty. And the good news is that we're in a really good place and actually have a timeline and process to access these grants. As a quick overview, each district is able to request up to $2 million. There is a cap on what the total amount that urban districts are able to request, which is 40% of the total 15 million. So only 6 million, excuse me, only 6 million of the total 15 can go to urban districts. So the recommendation that you'll see is based on that sort of reality. So Mark, if you go to the next slide, I'd just like to give the board a quick rundown on what we're doing and why we have a good certainty of being able to access these grants. So by the end of this month, we'll be completing the intake forms for each one of the districts, making the request. Business Oregon has their own internal process, which is a stand-up meeting where it's basically the go, no-go decision. And we are penciled in for the January 31st meeting. So we're already on the agenda for that. We'll need, if we get the thumbs up, which we have a high level of certainty that we'll be able to complete those applications in full by mid-March. And we've already been penciled in on the Infrastructure Finance Authority board's agenda for April 1st. And so that is required for any project over $3 million. And so this project is over that threshold, but it's also a really good opportunity to help educate that board about the statewide need and in particular the needs for our project. So where that will lead is conditional approval, and conditional approval will allow Business Oregon to begin drafting all the contract language, everything else that we'll need for disbursement. And so by the end of this fiscal year or over the summer, we should be able to have the contracts signed. And then by October of this year, we'll be able to start receiving those grant funds. So one thing, and the reason why this is that conditional approval, is that everything is based on having those bond sales move forward. There's other options if the bonds don't move forward and they have a pretty high level of confidence that they are moving forward. Our regional development officer checked in with the CFO at Business Oregon, and everything is moving along as it should, but they just need to reserve the possibility of that bond sale not going through. So yeah, this is a really good news and a pretty huge development as far as financing this PED phase. So thank you for letting me walk through the process.
Great, thanks for that, Colin. And so now,
Hey,
drum
Colin.
roll. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, Colin, what's the source of revenue to support the bonds from the state? Was this just state general funds, or was this lottery dollars or a new revenue stream that enables this grant to, to be stood up?
Yeah, so it's not general funds, and so it is contingent on the bond sales. So that, yeah, that's where the funding is coming from.
But what's paying off the bond? Has to be some state revenues. to
Oh,
pay that
lottery, yeah,
back.
lottery
Lottery.
dollars. Yes,
Lottery, okay, it is
Yeah.
lottery, okay.
all
So-
it's still under the Infrastructure Finance Authority program, and so all of that is, or most all of that is lottery funded, not all of it.
That's great. Whatever we can do and I know staff will do that, is just to communicate the importance of how Oregon State Lottery dollars does come back into their communities. And this would just be another example. I know the state would appreciate that, but more importantly, our local landowners seeing the connection of how the state lottery works, right? So
That's a great point, Tom. I mean, there's requirements for written documents, which is basically like a blurb saying paid by lottery dollars. But I think amplifying that message and incorporating that in a more visible place is a really great suggestion. Thank you.
Any other questions for Colin before we move on to the staff recommendation? Okay, great. Thanks, Colin. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide
Thanks, Jamie.
and hand it to you, Mark.
Thanks. Again, I guess we've let the cat out of the bag here with regards to our confidence in this mechanism. So a couple months ago, as Jamie said earlier, we weren't really sure which of those boxes you saw on that prior graphic were going to be best suited to help address this problem. But as we've spent a lot of time with the Business Oregon folks, we've gotten this renewed confidence that this is indeed a really solid plan A. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the exact numbers for plan A, and then of course we like to operate with both belt and suspenders. So I'll talk about the plan B. So the state levy grant is funded on a biennial basis. So the first 2 years of PED, we will need $4.16 million for the Corps of Engineers. So the state loan grant, state levy grant requires a 20% cost share by the districts. I'll show you a graph here in a moment, but that equates to $208,000 equally split. The reason for this purpose, for Plan A, we're using an equitable split between the 4 districts is so that we can ask for a maximum amount of funds. If we have, if we can't expect the different districts to make different, the request would be proportional, and we wouldn't be able to ask for the full amount available. So this allows us to ask for the maximum amount, and you'll see how that works out. It works out really well, still works out well under the previous cost arrangements that we've brought to you in the past. Ben is going to speak more to this subject, but this $208,000, I think you recall from our previous meetings, is well within the current financial capability of SDIC, given all the reserves as well as the assessments over the next few years. So again, a reminder, this is gonna cover 74% of PED. So this is a really great option to use. Here are the numbers by district. We split it equitably. You see that 2.3 the first year, and then 1.87 million the next year. Those distributions just come from the expected spending curve that the Corps projects for the first 2 years of PED. And it's obviously front loaded with things like survey and other things that enable the design process to move forward. So that first year is the biggest year. And so with those numbers being different, when you offset that by the 20% cost share, these are the numbers that are provided. And that 115 and essentially 94K add up to 208,000. So this works out pretty well. Does anyone have any questions on this distribution before I move on?
Mark, just a question. So looking at SDIC, I see our total commitment in this model be 1.4 million. 20% local match would be 280,000. So I would expect years 1 to 4 to equal 280. Why am I not seeing that?
The total.
Because the less than million, huh?
Right.
We have to cover 400,000.
It'll actually be the first 2 years. It'll be 832,000. Sorry. Yeah, the 1.4 is what the Corps is going to be needing over the course of the 4 years. We'll be getting approximately 3.3 will be the state levy grant funds share of that 4.16. That's 80% of the 4.16, and we'll be paying the balance for the year 1 and year 2. Years 3 and 4, we've laid it out as if there was no additional grant funds, but we will be eligible. If we make the assumption that the new district will be consolidated at that point, we'll only be able to ask for up to 2 million for years 3 and 4, but we will still be able to make that request. If we have 4 independent districts, then we'll be able to do the same thing that we did this round, and ask for up to 2 million each. But again, just to clarify, why wouldn't we ask for, the maximum amount, 2 million? We could, for the purposes of the PMLS PED request, we actually only need 3.3 million total amongst the 3 districts when you consider the 20% cost share requirement. Does that make sense?
And we are talking about making a full request for the 2 million, because why shouldn't we? It just may not be exclusively for PED. We may bring in other projects. So we're still working on that other part of the proposal, but we've sort of submitted the entire slate of all of our needs to Business Oregon so that they can help us identify various different funding opportunities for all of our needs, not just the PMLS PED. But that's what Mark is focusing on today.
Just a point of information for board members, Colin lost power at his house, so he's trying to figure it out, and will potentially attach again by phone, but if he appears absent, it's because he is. So
he was.
So Mark, I guess I'm just seeing in this model, just looking at 2 million guaranteed first biennium, I'm looking at about 566,000 would be SDIC share. I guess all the districts would be committing to 566.
Yes.
Thereabouts.
And again, as Evan alluded to, yeah, we have opportunities to ask to offset what our out-of-pocket costs will be. But yeah, that 566, that again is less than what we were talking about with respect to project cost-based allocation originally without a state levy grant. So it's working out pretty well for us. That said, again, I mentioned the suspenders. Well, I don't know if you prefer a belt or suspenders, but now I'm going to talk about the suspenders. That's my backup.
And while Mark is flipping slides, I've emphasized this at every board meeting that we've met with so far. We are not choosing between A and B. The staff recommendation is Plan A. Plan B is truly a contingency that we have, in case the state grant funds don't come through. So just want to make that super clear.
Yeah. So again, our contingency plan, and when I'm going to talk a little bit about our next steps, but we're going to ask you to sort of approve both Plan A and B, wherever, where we land on those, so that if for some reason in the spring we don't receive conditional approval, or for some reason Plan A doesn't work out, we have already sort of vetted a Plan B, so that we're ready to pivot to progress forward on the next solution quickly. But again, I don't want that to undermine our confidence in Plan A. But Plan B is a contingency plan only if we don't get the state levy grant. So can't emphasize that enough. So Plan B, you can see these are the allocations, and I'm going to talk a little bit, and Ben's going to talk in detail about how we expect his recommendations for how SDIC funds their share of both that cost share for Plan A and the cost share for Plan B. But these are the distributions. We've laid out a distribution. We realized there's variability in the costs. So if everybody has to shoulder the entire burden of PED, we laid out this distribution, which is the hybrid or composite distribution, which is based to 50% on project costs and 50% on economic benefits. It works out favorably for SDIC. It's 11% versus the 15-16% that we were talking about if we factor in project costs. So it brings our commitment for the first 2 years to $452,000. So still very manageable within the capability of SDIC. And I'm just going to move forward to that. I think I've covered all that material. So does anyone have any questions before we move on to our next steps? Go back to this real quick. Okay.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Hey, this is
Hi,
Brian
Brian.
Sheep. Hey, so I do have a question about the accounting for the project when it comes to those grants. Looking at the difference between the two plans there, you have the 1.4 million for Plan A, and then the 616,000 for Plan B. I just want to make sure that I understand the accounting requirements under the grant, just in case there's questions on where the money is going. I just want to identify the delta there between the two, so that in case there's any sort of accounting requirements on where the money's going, that we can adequately explain where the 1.4 mil went.
Okay, well, I'll let Evan, I think in terms of Business Oregon's accounting requirements, you might be more familiar with that, but are you clear on the question?
Yeah, I think, Brian, you're asking essentially how Business Oregon is going to require us to demonstrate how the dollars have been spent.
Correct.
I can't answer the question super specifically yet, but we've done this with them on multiple projects before where we've had costs split out for various districts. And so part of the intake process, we'll be working with them to figure out exactly what we're saying, each district is paying for with their $1 million, proportion of the cost. And so we'll have an agreement going in on what it is that they're paying for. And typically the way that they handle it is they give us a couple of big buckets that we need to stay within. And then they give us a little bit of flexibility to move things within those buckets. But generally we need to stay within, kind of. So if, for instance, I'm just making this up off the top of my head because I haven't thought it through in a lot of detail, but one of the grants that we currently have from them, we have like a staff bucket, a strategic planning bucket, a communications bucket. And so they'll likely help us come up with something like that works for them, for their requirements for lottery funding, so that all the dots connect.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Just thank you, Brian, for bringing that up. So it does raise a question. It's so Emily, so I think the model showed if SDIC's project cost alone was, say, 800,000, right? If Business Oregon gives us $1 million, to get $1 million, we need to spend, $1 million plus 20%. So how does that work? I guess I think that's the accounting Brian's asking for. So if we receive a grant for $1 million, but our project costs are only 800,000, how do we,
So
Because
you're,
the grant was to SDIC, so it's a fair question. And so-
Tom, I think again, and we've tried to underscore this multiple times, there's the project cost number that we've been using is not based on the actual project costs for the design phase. We don't know those yet. So they're based on the project, a percentage of what they think the cost may be. As we work towards getting closer to the design phase and actually signing a contract with the Corps, we'll get much more specific on what the actual costs are for PED. We've been really transparent with Business Oregon about that, and they understand that we have this 5.6 nut that we need to pay, and they want to help us. I mean, they're in the business of helping people get infrastructure projects done. And so they're fully aware that it, you know, what the specific costs may come down to, it could be slightly different, but that, you know, they want us to maximize our ask. And they also were the ones that they went back and confirmed that we can indeed request for each district, even though the Corps sees it as one individual project. And they're just trying to help us maximize as many dollars as possible, because it's in their best interest to distribute the funds, or they'll lose them and not be able to get them again. And so, you know, I think everybody is well aware that the dollars and cents may not perfectly match up per district, but we're all going to work together to figure it out to solve the overall problem of 5.6 million that we have to pay locally to ensure this project moves forward.
Yeah, just hearing the assurance that Business Oregon is going to allow us to kind of fudge the boundary lines a little bit. So that's great to hear.
Okay. Well, great. Does anyone have any other questions? I don't want to cut this off. It's all these numbers are in your board memo, so it should be available for you for study if you have additional questions. But
Evan?
Mark, the only thing that I want to make sure we add, because this board in particular has had a couple different resolutions or discussions of resolutions floating around, is you know, we're working, Mark and Jamie are presenting this and the staff recommendation this month, and we'll have a resolution for you all to review next month. If it seems like everybody's ready to pass that resolution next month, that would be great. You know, the more assurances we get early on for the budget season, the better. But we, you know, have a couple of months of flexibility if we need to keep working on it. We expect to know by April, really, when, like, for sure what grant, whether or not we're gonna get the grant dollars, how many grant dollars. But you know, we'd like to lock the resolution down and kind of put this particular issue to bed as soon as possible.
So Evan, I guess if we're starting to talk about creating a resolution, I do want to just kind of, you know, brief Ken and Tanny on some discussions I had with county leadership. And this, you know, you're all familiar, MCDD staff is familiar with this kind of this position. You know, I represent the SDIC landowners, and we have a close partnership with Troutdale, and you know, we've talked about, you know, our need to kind of stay in our lanes. At the same time, we are working with a collaboration of 4 other districts and, you know, a community that relies on us to get our work done. But I'm also, you know, continue to recognize, I've always communicated to everybody, I represent SDIC. I don't represent the system. You know, that's the urban is the system. I'm SDIC. And I just need to be mindful of, you know, my constituents are those landowners. So, in my discussions with the county, it's, you know, governments always go into these 190 IGAs where we collaborate and we invest dollars to get work done. But we've always put a cap on our investments. You know, it's always up to an amount. none of these allocations have any cap. So earlier, this isn't new, earlier communication, I said, we're great with any other allocation model as long as it doesn't exceed X. So I think I'm still going to be asking for that consideration. And I know it puts a wrinkle in this fabric, and I hear that, but it's just, I'm just trying to follow through with my commitment with Troutdale and our landowners that we want to be accountable to the SDIC boundaries. Because we're constructing things. This isn't a planning. We're actually building assets in our district. So, so if you could talk to that, or is that feasible that you could fold in, a not to exceed amount? I mean, all of the IGAs the county enters, it's always a not to exceed amount is the limit.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, my perspective is, and again, we will follow the board's direction on this, of course, but the original number that was based on your assumption of project costs is greater than any of the numbers we are proposing to you. So we've walked into this proposal in our efforts with Business Oregon in an effort to honor the debate and conversations we've had with the SDIC board and your commitments to your landowners. So my preference right now would be that you reserve the right to not approve any additional spending above that number. We're not asking you to go above that cap that you shared with us before. So it's premature from my perspective to call that policy out when no one's asking you to go beyond that number that you originally shared with us. And by asking for it now, it sets off a string of other conversations that make this entire effort significantly more challenging. So you reserve the right as a board to object to any number that's going to come at you down the road. And you have our commitment as a staff that if we don't get these grants, we know we're going to be sitting with all of you and working through the challenge that presents together. So that's my reaction. I appreciate where you're coming from. I want to respect that number. And I think we can, but pulling that into the conversation right now, again, creates a dynamic that's more challenging for your staff.
I really appreciate that, Jim. So just to follow up, just for clarification. So in a resolution, we would be authorizing contributions up to resolution or option A or option B amounts, not the concept. So it's not 1/4 of whatever number, it's that number.
Yeah. So that's a piece that I was going to add as well, is I think we can reference the 5.6 million as part in that resolution, because we're going to provide these two scenarios. So that provides an overall cap. And we already know that 5.6 number is the most conservative. The Corps has told us over and over that we're not going to go anywhere near that high. In fact, their budget, they have one version of the budget that is significantly lower. So we're using this one to make sure that we are giving everybody a really good buffer. And so I think that number definitely applies, but in terms of specific district numbers, I think Jim shared a reasonable.
Thanks, Evan. Ken or Tanny, I've been doing a lot the talking on, kind of my position. I would really appreciate to hear your views, and I don't want to muscle this discussion any one direction. I'm just really looking for a discussion.
Well, it seems like the team has done what we've asked them to do. And, I appreciate that them reaching out to Business Oregon to also potentially reduce the contributions. That's huge for the landowners in general, and the rates that we'd have to pass along. And so, to me, I think they're on the right track. And I think we are asking the right questions. Tom, I appreciate the questions you're just asking. And but in general, I think just my perspective is I feel like the staff has done a lot of the homework we've asked. So I appreciate that.
Well, thanks for sharing all your thoughts and your concerns. I think as Jim pointed out, we've definitely been trying to respect those and trying to listen to your needs and understand the position that you're in, trying to represent your district, but move forward this collective project. So we'll be able to answer any other questions in the near future. I did want to just reiterate, Evan alluded to that we would be bringing forth that resolution and in the future and IGA to work these, to codify these details moving forward. So
I feel like it's my place to be a little more pointed than Evan. She's being too nice to you guys. We want to pin this down so we can move forward with our budgeting as soon as we can. I'm going to be candid with you. I don't want to give you more time. I want to make this decision.
But I appreciate doing it as a dollar cap, and that is what I needed to see. So how we derived it, that's great, but it's that dollar cap. And then I can talk to my landowners if they say we're benefiting SDIC landowners because this option was at a lesser cost to the landowners.
and
Yeah.
I'll
Hey,
just
Mark, Tanny's unmuted a couple of times. Tanny, I want to make sure that you've got some space to say something if you need.
No, I appreciate that, Jamie. I just wanted to just say, I agree, Tom, with your statement.
Okay.
And I'm just going to provide one last detail on this estimate to underscore the 5.6. I've said it before, but I just wanted to be very clear. And I think I put it in the initial table that Jamie presented on the overall cost. The 5.6 it includes escalation for present estimates of escalation for inflation, and it includes a 25% contingency. So that's what the buffer consists of. The actual number that those are based on was derived, as Evan indicated, it's just a multiplier of the project costs. So I don't expect the project costs to shift dramatically. The Corps actually did the same thing when they did the tentatively selected plan. They had what they call a parametric estimate, and then they did a detailed cost estimate, and they actually came out fairly close. So so these numbers were certified by their cost center, so they had peer review. It wasn't just done within the district. And so there's no guarantee that the numbers might not be different, but we've been given a great level of certainty because we've said a couple of times to them, "Are you sure this time? Are you sure?" What, and they did give us a lower number at one point, and then we said, "You gave us a higher number. Are you sure?" And they said, "Oh, that's right. That we didn't include escalation in that number. So you're right. It is still 5.6 when you include that." So I just want you guys to know what some of the background dealings are on these numbers. With your staff, we push the Corps very hard to make sure we're feeding you the correct numbers. So,
Mark, question, just as the project moves forward, how is finance going to track the betterments to these respective districts? Because the design right-of-way construction costs will be capitalized as assets. So I just want to make sure that, there is some accounting occurring on the back end, so our ledgers show the improvements.
when you say betterments, I want to make sure we're talking about the same use of that term. And I think Evan's shaking there because I'm probably thinking of it I'm embedded with the Corps. So
yeah, so it's an accounting practice. So if you're improving an asset beyond a certain value, you capitalize it. So another term is a betterment. So it's capitalization. Capitalization is defined by anything starting in the design phase is eligible to be capitalized. Right-of-way acquisition, easements, and then the hard construction, because that will have to get a book entry into SDIC's ledger as we're improving our system, right? Because we're not a system yet, we're still 4 sets of accounting books. So that's gonna be happening on the back end. So at some point, if for some reason at the completion of the PED and construction, we're not an urban, we're going to see what our project investments were with this PED work. It would be it would be accounted for.
Yeah, I expect that to happen not during PED, but once the capital assets are actually added, and we'll be working with finance to make sure that that is captured accurately during the construction phase. I mean, we'll start to capitalize when we buy easements, and that'll be on the front end of construction. But then, obviously, the assets we won't be seeing for a while. PED is not going to be building anything, of course. It's just the design. And we'll start to characterize
those costs will be capitalizable. We need to, that just came up recently, and we need to confirm it with Janet and probably get it documented from our auditor. But there's been multiple discussions, and at least from our bond counsel and the council we've been talking to, those costs should be capitalizable.
Tom, we'll be working with the auditors and making sure it's very similar to what we do with the JCA now, that we blow back the liability to the districts and the assets back to each individual district. So we'll be making sure that that's all happening in my department.
I know you, Janet. Thank you so much. It's just I'm a finance person as well.
I know
the project team wants to just build, but it's the accountings that still have to kind of follow the marbles wherever they roll.
Right. And I'm still very much focused on, we are individual districts right now. Everybody at the district gets really tired of me saying, we're not there yet. We're still individual districts. So I do really pay attention to those separate buckets and how we're going to do that. So
I can personally attest to that.
So I'm mindful of the time. We have just 2 quick slides. Actually, I think it's only 1 slide. Nope. Yeah, just the one, just to talk about next steps. If folks, do we have 2 more? Just to talk about next steps. If we could just do that real quick. So if you want to go back to the big calendar. So this is familiar to you. We keep bringing this forward. We refine it and tweak it a little bit, to keep it updated. You can see we're here in the winter of 21-22, and we're having the funding options and decision conversation. So that's that piece. The partner contributions and collaboration discussions continue. And then, and Mark, do you want to just share a little bit about the hazardous, toxic, radioactive waste
Sure.
item?
You may recall, I guess it's about a year ago now, we just kind of filled you in on the hazardous, toxic, radioactive waste situation. That's a core acronym. It basically just means environmental contaminants encountered during construction, and the Corps' work to identify anything that poses risk to the project as we once we get into design and construction. That effort led to one site being identified, and what we're doing is just as we received funding for this in last year's budget to pay for our contractor Apex to go through the work that the Corps did and just make sure that there wasn't anything they felt was missing, that everything was done to standard, and that they don't have any additional recommendations to help mitigate our risk. So that's being contracted right now, and we'll be bringing that to you in the spring for your awareness and any recommendations that we have once that's done.
And then if you want to go to the next slide, I think it's just kind of a recap of what we've just talked about. So we're looking to have a resolution at the February format. And so there'll be some more conversation about that, a draft for folks to review in advance. As Jim so pointedly requested, we're looking to tie this up sooner than later so that it can be inform the budget process and be on track for that. And so this is why you see this schedule here. And then we're continuing to track an update on the Business Oregon funds with conditional approval in April. So you'll be seeing us every month, every board meeting with updates as we move forward and as we all get more certain and more information and a little bit smarter about the project. So Mark, anything else before we hand it back over to the board?
No, thanks, Jamie. Appreciate your help.
And if I could just say, I want to thank the board. I know this is a really, really, really foundational topic for you all and for your landowners. And I know that I personally created some tension early on in this and hopefully have been accountable for that, and that we found a place where we can have a dialogue. And I think some of the hard questions you've asked us have made us smarter and better at coming up with a solution that's workable. So I think we'll have some additional hard conversations around the financing, but I just appreciate that you guys are bringing it and we can put it on the table and have an honest conversation about it. So thank you.
Thank you, staff. It's really been a robust discussion. Are we ready to move on to Ben? Yep. Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Ben Rowe, budget manager. I know I'm still new. I'm still playing the new guy card. I'm gonna share my screen here. And it should just take a moment. And do you see my presentation? All right, got a thumbs up from Jim. So we're gonna take a tiny step back here and just review our budget process for a moment. We're gonna talk about the budget calendar, our review of our priorities. We'll revisit our current year financials just for a second, and then we'll go into the forecasts as promised. So when looking at the calendar, today's the 20th. Today we're sharing our financial forecast as we promised earlier in the year. And then we'll be back in, I should say, staff will propose their budgets by the end of February. And then we'll be back to this group, to this board in April 14th, with a proposed budget. And Emily will be reaching out, Emily or Wendy will be reaching out a couple weeks before the April 14th presentation to your budget liaison so that we can sit down and share our proposed budget with whoever your chosen liaison is. And we can discuss that before it's presented. And then we'll be back again in May with for an approved budget. Any questions on the calendar before we move forward? Okay, these are all regularly scheduled board meetings, but if we need additional meetings, I'm pretty sure we can handle that. Okay, so we presented a more lengthy preview of our budget priorities in, I think, our prior conversations, our prior meetings. This is a very high level summary. These values are the new latest and greatest values that Evan presented, I believe, last month for the new Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District. So those have been updated. And again, these are very high level in your board packets from either December or November. You should have a more lengthy list of our priorities. But in brief, we're focusing on safety and safety enhancements for staff, stewardship, and our equity efforts. Just a brief review of our current year financials. I just wanted to show you that we have updated this financial report to include the $72,000 that somehow was omitted from the budget. The total revenue hadn't changed, so the total revenue was still accurate. It was just that value that was missing from the report. And this report might be slightly different from what was in your original board packet because there was another minor omission in debt service in last year. And so this number of excess revenue for 2021 has been updated as well. Again, just to reflect the actual debt service that was paid last year. Okay, any final questions before we go into the forecasts? Okay, so with Plan A, and this might look slightly different from the forecast, the graphic that was included in your packet. The only changes that I implemented here is I wanted to show this blue shaded section. This is the amounts that the grants would pay for, and this yellow section up at the top, the 115 in next year and the 95 these would be the figures that the district would actually contribute towards the PED costs in those fiscal years. So this revenue, the green line, you can see, and with Plan A, this is the grant revenue coming into the district, and you can see that spike. And then that grant revenue would be drawn down by these blue figures. And then the district would pick up their contribution, 115,000 next year and 95 in the subsequent year. So this forecast, the major assumptions in this forecast is that the district would increase its assessments 7% each year. That's included in the forecast. So 2023 through 25, the assessments are increased 7%. That's just an assumption. The board can select any assessment increase that they wish. I just use that as a placeholder. According to this forecast, you can see your reserves at the end of this forecast in 2025 would close out 2025, June 30, 2025, with approximately $1.7 million in reserves. That's combined both reserve buckets, dedicated and undedicated. And that represents over 15 months of operating expenditures. So if and when we get the grant and we pay for the PED costs through 2025 and fully fund our currently constituted capital program, that's the gray bar, we would conclude 2025 with that $1.7 million. So that is Plan A. I'll also mention that the expenditures, the expenditure forecast, there's an assumption of expenditure increases between 4 and 9% on expenditures, depending on what the line item is. And I'm just want to make sure I covered all of the dynamics. And I just want a friendly reminder that Plan A, receiving the state grants, there's an equal PED cost distribution. So all districts would have the same cost distribution. So all districts, blue shaded bars and the yellow shaded bars would look the same in this scenario. Okay, I want to pause there. Any questions on the Plan A financial forecast?
Questions, Danny or Ken?
No questions on my end.
Okay. We already covered this earlier in the
Question, Tanny?
No, I'm good right now. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. We already covered this earlier in the meeting, but you can see the drop in operating expenditures, and that is reflective of paying off, retiring your debt in 2022. So that's why you see a decrease in operating expenditures from 2022 to 23. Okay, Plan B forecast. The assumptions are identical. So the assumption of assessment increases of 7% each year is identical, and also the operating expenditure increases are also identical, 4 to 9% each year, depending on the line item. This represents not receiving the state grants, but because we would change the PED cost distribution, what the district is paying towards PED is different, and that is really the only difference between Plan A and Plan B. So the CIP, the capital program, is identical. The only thing that's changing here is the grant revenue and the amount the district would be paying towards the PED project. With this scenario, into June 30, 2025, the district would end the year with approximately $1.4 million in reserves, combined reserves. And that is approximately, I want to get this right, about 14 to 15 months of operating expenditures. So depending on what the board wishes to do, you could increase or decrease your assumption on assessment increases through 2025. And I'll pause here for questions or comments.
Ben, my apologies. I have some contractors outside, so if that vibratory plate is coming through, my apologies.
No problem.
I like the curve of the reserves in this graph better. So I know that will be part of our budget discussion. I don't like those spikes on reserves unless it's planned. What we're not seeing here is our future capital liabilities in those out years. Because what we're addressing right now is our PED investment, but until we're told we're not SDIC, I need to be anticipating my capital construction contributions with the Army Corps work as well. So, that reserve, maybe it needs to be 2 million to meet what we're expecting in the next horizon. And you and I have had this discussion. It's, this is a snapshot, but it doesn't tell us what's in the future. And I don't know, is 1.4 our reserve target? Is it 1.7? Is it 2? Is it 2.6? That's the piece that we could use some help on, I think.
Sure, I can tell you right now that the 1.4 in this scenario and also the 1.7 in Plan A scenario is insufficient to cover your construction costs in outer years for PED. So if this board is interested in building the reserve sufficiently to cover those costs, then you would be looking at increasing your assessments beyond the 7%.
Yeah, but that's assuming we wouldn't pursue financing, right? If we were to be funding construction, I would assume we would be financing that and pay it out over multiple, 10, 15, 20 years. And again, I want to minimize my rate increases to my landowners to the point that it makes sense, right? So I would assume we would do a capital financing investment to do that construction work. Right now, we have sufficient funds to get us through the PED. But I think those reserves can come way down and then anticipate financing if needed to execute construction. Because this is purely a cash basis, no external financing for those out years.
That's correct. And I could, if this board wished, I could put together a forecast that would reflect that scenario, and I could bring that back to you.
Yeah, and I guess I'm trying to get the lowest rate increase to my landowner that we can allow until you say, Tom, we're gonna be insolvent. We need to have it at X. So I don't need to build a landslide of reserves if it's not planned. So it's easy to defend a large reserve as long as there's a plan. So.
Yep, makes sense.
One of the challenges with that out year forecast on core projects is that if we don't have a bond or something, none of the districts are going to be in a position to engage in that capital program. So there's just a huge amount of speculation about this potential failure of our cooperative effort here. So I don't know that there's actually a feasible approach to move forward with the core project without the success of the new district. I'm just going to be candid with you. So I just don't know how valuable that information is. I think if we fail, we're all going to have to sit down together and come up with a different plan. So I'm happy to provide that information. I just don't know how relevant it's going to be, because I don't know that you're going to be able to carve out your portion of the core program without the broader effort. Happy to engage in a conversation about that. I think you're asking really smart questions, and I think we need to have your landowners feel satisfied, but this forecasting. I'm a little worried about capacity and the types of what ifs that it starts to present on an individual district basis. I think it would be a challenge we'd have to solve collectively.
Yeah, I'm representing SDIC, so that's where I'm kind of needing to stay focused on their needs and cooperate when there's when the opportunity presents itself. So
yeah, I guess what I'm trying to
to
say is I don't know that there's a capital program option for SDIC that looks anything like what we're talking about with the cost forecast for PMLS. I don't think there's an individual option for SDIC going forward in the failure of a capital bond.
Then if you can demonstrate that, that would be great, Jim. I just haven't seen that we couldn't meet our obligations.
Okay, well, we'll do some more internal thinking about it. I appreciate that line of questioning, I really do, and I think you're asking for something reasonable. I'm just not sure the scenario you have in your mind is actually feasible.
Yeah, I'm ready for dissolution, you know, but until such time, Ben's got some great forecast here, tools that we haven't had in the past, and this is most helpful. So we have thoughtful rate escalations with the target. So that's all I'm trying to do in SDIC and our cooperations through any 190 IGAs that we may form. So Tanny or Ken, any feedback for Ben or questions?
Yeah, I would just say, I think this is great information, very, very helpful. And I do think it would be good to see the scenario of financing the capital in later years if we needed to, just to have that information. I think it'd be a benefit for us.
Yeah, I agree. I think just my perspective is I like the idea of not having these spikes of increase. So if we can level those out, that is really helpful, that scenario, even if it's a little percentage wise higher, having those massive price spikes are really harmful to the landowners, and it's hard to predict. And then the capital, I guess Tom, Tanny, what you're asking for is if we went standalone as a district, what would it cost to finance out those capital project needs, and what does that look like into the future?
Yeah, no, I'm not speculating we'd be our own district. I'm just, until we're dissolved, I'm just trying to be planning for any of our obligations. And Army Corps is, you know, we're starting down a path, right? And it could go to construction. My hope is the urban has stood up and they move forward. It's just until such time, this is a great tool for us to be thoughtful in our rate creation. So
I guess, is it plausible that it would go to construction as an individual district versus the entirety of the district? Would they be comfortable with just one district doing the construction?
I mean, Ken, my thinking is if the Army Corps gives us construction funding, the partners, all the districts are going to find the money to do the local match, right? I have to think that's going to happen. We're not going to let 65% of federal dollars leave this community.
So I think in some ways it's worst case, but we need to do it.
Mr. Chair, why don't we schedule a call between you and Ben and Evan and Colin to come up with the parameters that you want to incorporate into that forecast, and what are the assumptions that we want to make about the range of capital that SDIC would want to invest, and how we handle federal or non-federal participation. Because I want to make sure, I'm happy to provide the forecast. I want to make sure we provide the information you want, and that is connected to the potential failure of federal investment, what that might actually look like for SDIC. I want it to be accurate So if that's okay with the rest of the board, we can assign the appropriate staff to work with you to frame out that that forecast, and we can get it ready for you, I think, relatively quickly.
Yeah, I'm happy to meet and have that discussion. Is Tanny or Ken, I mean, would you like to be part of that discussion?
Yeah, we can schedule a special time for that if you'd like. We just need to notice it.
Yeah,
But I think it'd be good to get a little more guidance on what are your capital plans absent the broader group.
I appreciate that, Jim. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Ben, thank you for your work.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, this
Ben,
is
are you?
this is really good work, Ben. Thank you very much.
Great job, Ben.
Appreciate it.
Moving on in the agenda, sponsorship. Aster, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I just want to do a time check. Are we running low on time? Should I try to get through this pretty fast? Yeah, okay, are we good? That means we're good on time?
I would go ahead. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool, great.
I think we're good, Aster. Thank you.
All right, awesome, great. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm Aster Moulton. I've been with the drainage districts for about 5 months now, and I'm public affairs and community relations specialist. I've been focusing on a lot of communications and outreach activities, and part of what I've been doing is manage the sponsorship program. Here to give you a brief update on some of the proposed changes to that program. Gonna share my screen. Hopefully share the right one. All right. Are you seeing a presentation? Yep, great. All right. So, sorry, it's not forwarding. There we go. So some of the proposed changes that I'm going to go over today include our efforts to streamline what is funded in the events and sponsorships budget line item. A lot of things other than traditional sponsorships currently fall into that budget line item. Also to bring you up to speed on our recent efforts to bring a little more structure and transparency to how we make sponsorship related decisions. This is a briefing today to go over a brief introduction of the topic, answer any preliminary questions you have, and then next week we'll come back with a little more detail and seek your approval on the overall direction that we're headed in. So first thing to know about the sponsorship program, it is funded in the events and sponsorships budget line item. SDIC's budget this fiscal year is $2,200. It has historically included a lot of different types of programs, as I mentioned, including district hosted events, tabling fees, educational partnerships, and traditional sponsorships. And when I say traditional sponsorships, I mean opportunities where we fund an organization's mission through a gala, for instance, without having any direct benefit as an agency outside of the networking and marketing opportunities. And I forgot to mention, the reason this program is important, we've had it for about 5 years now, and it's been a great way for us to cultivate community partnerships and gain access to those unique networking opportunities, as well as it's a good platform for increasing flood awareness in our local community. So I mentioned we want to streamline a little bit what is actually funded in the events and sponsorships budget line item. I mentioned that we fund educational partnerships. We're distinguishing that from traditional sponsorships in that educational partnerships are mutually beneficial opportunities with us and a partner organization. A good example of that is our partnership with the Columbia Slough Watershed Council to provide flood education to schools living located in the Columbia Slough watershed. And we've also funded tabling fees, a couple other random things. So we're gonna recategorize some of that so that all that remains in the events and sponsorships budget line item will be those traditional sponsorships, as well as district hosted events such as Spike the Levees. We want to add a little bit of structure and transparency to this program. As I mentioned, one way we're proposing to do that is by establishing criteria from which to measure sponsorship proposals against. And just this will ensure that sponsorship decisions are relevant to drainage districts, missions, values, including the new equity policy that MCDD recently passed. One thing to mention is oftentimes public agencies have community advisory committees that help with funding related decisions. We think the size of this program doesn't necessarily warrant a larger committee process. We think the decisions, it'd be most efficient if the decisions were made internally by MCDD staff with the criteria to guide those decisions. So I'm not going to go into detail about the exact criteria, but here's an overview. It's on an 11-point scale. It considers geography, equity, flood education, operational relevancy, and whether or not the partnership is an emerging or existing drainage district relationship. The process would be pretty simple. Each requesting organization would fill out a short form. The questions of those forms would relate back to the criteria, and then MCDD would use that criteria to score the proposal 1 to 11. The higher the score, the greater potential there would be for funding. And if a proposal scored pretty low, say less than 5, we would consider not funding that proposal. Another process change that we are considering implementing, and we're working with our legal team on this effort, is that board members and staff would no longer be directly submitting sponsorship requests. Instead, if a board member or a staff was a part of an organization that wanted to receive sponsorship funds, we would ask that someone else from that organization submit that request. And that will help manage power dynamics, as well as reduce any appearance of conflict of interest. So the next step, in addition to answering any questions you have now, will be to go into more detail next month and seek your general approval of the direction we're headed in. So thank you. That's all I have for you. Wanted to keep it brief so that there would be time for discussion. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Esther, thank you so much. We really appreciate the work you're doing to build awareness. Just a quick question. Do you have any connections with Reynolds School District?
I don't personally, but I do believe that the Columbia Slough Watershed Council works with them in their flood education program.
We also, sorry, I am managing a toddler, as you can see, while also listening to the board meeting. We also have some relationships with some administrators there that we've built up through the years through our tabling. This is Naomi, say hi. Through our tabling opportunities, actually, we met a number of folks through some of the events we used to do out in Troutdale. So we certainly have a few relationships that we could leverage if you have ideas.
Yeah, it's a huge, I mean, it's our biggest youth constituent group in the Sandy area. And I never want to diminish the opportunities to engage youth and the outdoors and infrastructure. And it's just, I think there's an opportunity there. And it sounds like you have connections. So that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. Trying to focus for SDIC, focus some of the effort in reaching out to the community that are based in East Multnomah County would be helpful. The Reynolds School District is a great opportunity. Other opportunities might be Mount Hood Community College.
Yeah, I appreciate those suggestions. Something we are planning on doing once this criteria and our application form gets a little more formalized is to announce the opportunity. And we'll be sure to announce the opportunity to community members in East County.
I also want to just add the other piece that we're talking about that Esther just slightly touched on is partnerships. There's kind of this difference that we're thinking about between sponsorships and partnerships. We hope that the new district will have an opportunity to have a more robust budget for both of those categories than what we currently have. But it's definitely something that we're thinking about and hoping to pursue. Right now, that's our sort of strongest partnership is with the Columbia Slough Watershed Council, and they do education in the Reynolds School District. And they're starting to reach out to colleges and community colleges. So we'll definitely flatten out in the community college for them. But hopefully that's something we can build out even further in the future as we have more revenue.
Danny, I thought you had something to share.
No, I think this is a great direction.
Thanks, Aster.
Yeah, thank you.
I think I'm
Jim,
all that
that's-
stands between you and freedom. I want to also just acknowledge that Aster, I don't know that they've been before you before, but Aster's been working on all of our homeless work and has really been instrumental in some of the progress that we've seen and trying to make those connections, Chair Hansel, that you talked about earlier. So just want to acknowledge the progress that Aster's helped us make in that space. Really only three things I want to share with you. First of all, tucked back in the corner over by Emily is a new board coordinator who started this week. It is Wendy Lynn. Hi, Wendy, you could wave. We hit her hard this week with 4 board meetings in her first week on the job, and it was a short week. So thanks for coming back today, Wendy. Wendy comes to us most recently from being Deputy Director of Business for a Better Portland. So she's familiar with working with a large business-oriented board in that capacity. She also was the executive director of a not-for-profit in the Rogue Valley called Thrive, which worked on food-related and food security issues with community members. So she had to work with a board there as well. So we are very excited to have her, and she's made great contributions and jumped in asking questions about names and acronyms already. So we like the assertive approach to learning here, and we're excited to have her. You'll be growing acquainted with Wendy over the coming weeks and months as she starts to work with you. The good news that comes with this also is that it allows us to free up some of Emily's time to support all of the organizing and coordinating and managing of the startup of the new district and all the different tests and people working on that. So she's going to be transitioning as Wendy gets up to speed in helping Colin and me and Evan and the rest of the team hold all those pieces and make sure we're communicating effectively with the legacy boards and the new board. 2 other items I want to share with you. We've made substantial progress on safety and security for our staff. Pump Station 4, which is pretty instrumental for some of the landowners in your area, is functional, and we have a regularly scheduled operating system going there. We are bringing armed security when the staff is there. But I guess what I want to say is things are still hard, but they're stable, and I think they're slowly improving. So staff is willing to go out there. We have a pretty good agreement with them about how we're going to operate and support them, and more to come on all of that. The second thing that I want you to be aware of, and Tanny's already aware of it, and Tanny, feel free to jump in. I want to share with you that we had a bit of a contentious debate on the urban board about which measures or which revenue methods to model. And at issue that caused a split was whether or not to include a permanent property tax levy or a serial levy as a way to operate the new district, putting that on the property tax rolls. A couple of things. Right now, we're not going to do that. That's where things stand, but we didn't get a clear direction from the urban board about what to model yet. So we're working with the chair and some of the urban board members, including Supervisor Stephenson, to figure out a path forward on that. 2 things that are important, I think, are one, the recommendation from the subcommittee that now no longer exists of that was to include the property tax. The full board was unable to reach a decision. The recommendation was to model it, not to implement it. And the other thing that I think is important for you all to know is that under the legislation that created the new district and under the proposed amendments, the new district doesn't have the authority to do it. So we'd have to go to the 23 session or another session, not the short one, it's too late, to get that authority. So I don't have a clear path forward yet, but I suspect there'll be more conversation. But what I did want you all to hear is there was some tension. And I thought the board members handled it well. It was a thoughtful debate and people were engaged. And I'm not sure where we're going to turn here, but I'm confident that we'll ultimately get through it. Tanny, how did I do presenting the situation?
I think very well. I would just call it a non-kumbaya moment. Little difference in opinions and philosophies. And if you hear anything about those East County people, that's probably what it's about.
And I know some of the, we reached out to to Commissioner Stegman and to Councillor Craddock, just to make sure that in case they heard about it, that they were aware. So we've tried to, we talked to Ray, and we've talked to Nolan, and we followed up with some others. So we're trying to figure out a path forward, and I'm hopeful, but I don't have it figured out yet. So there's much more to tell you. I guess the other thing is we have been invited to testify before the Congress on the House side on our WRDA project, which is very exciting. We'll be one of a small handful of people who were identified to highlight our project. We have support from the committee staff and the chair. Our bill was introduced in the Oregon legislature, and we are told we're likely to get a hearing on that in the coming days. We don't have a schedule for that, but so far that's moving as well. And with that, I want to recognize that we're over time, and happy to answer any questions, or if you have any follow-ups, let me know, and we'll make sure and get together with Emily and come up with a way to pencil out the forecast parameters on the long-term finances so that we can get that done for you in time for any decisions you all need to make.
Thank you, Jim. Ken, any questions of Jim?
No questions.
No, I just like to say great job, direction wise and everything. I think we're moving where we need to go.
I just appreciate your engagement. You've helped us get smarter, so keep bringing it. And Brian, you too, if you're still on, we appreciate you guys keeping it real.
Jim, one thing, we had talked about transitioning the IGA board over to the urban. Did that get completed?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Now we have to follow up with the jurisdictions to get them to endorse the couple of them that need to change. So we don't have a schedule for that yet, but we'll get it done in the next couple of months, I suspect.
Excellent.
Thanks for reminding me.
Jim, thanks again for your leadership. I kind of pity you having to report to so many boards, but you knew it coming in. So, but thank you for your leadership.
No, good folks. Everybody's doing their job, so we appreciate it. We are still looking for members for the urban board. We have 2 people affiliated with nonprofits, one social justice and one just a nonprofit with interest in the floodplain. They don't have to be located there. If you have any great ideas, let Mike Jordan or me know, or you could let Tammy know too. It'd be good to have more members. We got a little stuck with some absences. We couldn't move. Nobody could win.
Yeah.
There's nothing more frustrating than not being able to win or lose a fight,
Thanks, Jim. I want to go on to any new business. Brian, do you have anything for us today?
I don't.
Okay. With no new business to discuss, we'll go ahead and adjourn the SDIC January 20th meeting. Thank you, staff. Thank you, board members. Thank you, Brian. Much appreciated.
All right.